Hello, my name is Hailoh, and I wanted to pound out a really fast character tier list for FNaF World. Um, which might seem kind of weird because, first of all, I'm not the first person to ever make a FNaF World tier list. In fact, this isn't even the first one that I've made, even for characters. I've made a couple during my career, but first of all, this is the first one I'm going to be making all alone without anyone else, to talk about it. This is just my unadulterated thoughts, whatever, without any input from other people right now. And also just my opinion of the meta continues to change as time goes on, so I think that this will more closely reflect that. So we're just gonna start from the bottom and work our way from the top. I'm just gonna do all this in one take, so it might I might stutter a lot. It might be a horrible video, but whatever, who cares? So we're gonna start in, I guess, what would be the D tier. These are the characters that, in my opinion, are pretty much never ever useful, or maybe even just straight up detrimental to your party if you're using them. There aren't that many characters like this, but there are a few that I want to point out. In my opinion, I think that the worst character in the entire game, let me see if I can find him, is Paper Pals. Which might seem weird off the bat, but you need to think of a couple things to understand why I think Paper Pals is the worst. He has 3 moves. He has Prize Ball 2, Mystery Box 2, and Mimic Ball. Prize Ball 2 is the best move that Paper Pals has, but it's still not all that great. You're pretty much putting whatever move you do up to a dice roll, that's bad on its own, that you can't rely on the move that you're going to get. But the problem with Prize Ball 2 as opposed to Prize Ball 1, Prize Ball 1 is actually a pretty good move. Because there are moves from Prize Ball 1 that you'd actually want to get. Prize Ball 2 is kind of just, why would I want any of these moves? Like, you could get, there's some moves in Prize Ball 2 that are actually pretty good. You can get Gloom Balloon, Toxic Balloon, off the top of my head. I could be getting some of these slightly wrong, but Gloom Balloon and Toxic Balloon, those are okay. Freddles is okay. Pizza Wheel 2 is okay. I think you can get Hot Cheese 2. And then there are some other moves, like you can still get the 100 damage poppers from Prize Ball 2, which is good for Prize Ball 1, but not so good for Prize Ball 2, because it's 100 damage and you're in Tier 3 already. You can get Water Hose 2, which in 99% of situations is going to be completely useless. I don't think I've ever gotten use out of Water Hose 2 out of Prize Ball 2. The moves that you would get out of Prize Ball 2 just aren't, either they're just terrible moves that you wouldn't want anyway, or they're just more reliable ways to get those moves, so you'd never really want to rely on Prize Ball 2. Mystery Box 2 can situationally be good if you don't have other characters, but even then, you're putting the characters that you're going to get, again, up to a dice roll. It's entirely possible that you could get, 8 Jacobanis and, rail whatever's in front of you. That's totally possible. That is definitely possible. It's also possible that you could get Shadow Freddy 8 times in a row and Endoplush, It's like, can Mystery Box 2 work? Yes. Should you be relying on it? Absolutely not. It's just not. It can situationally be good, but those situations are so niche they may as well not exist. And then, what I believe to be the worst move in the game, Mimic Ball, which to some of you might not make sense, but if you're in the speedrunning community, you'll know that Mimic Ball is actually more of a detriment than anything actually useful. And I don't want to make this tier list for speedrunners. I think that this should be for casual players only. If this was a speedrunners tier list, it would look very different. But even in a casual playthrough, the way Mimic Ball works is whatever move you do, a few seconds after you do it, Mimic Ball will flash, Virtual Freddy will spawn, and it'll mimic the last move that you did. But there are two caveats to that. First of all, Virtual Freddy counts as a character. So while Virtual Freddy is active, the speed of the other characters in your party will not go up. So overall, it's actually slowing down your party while that one move is active. And you could argue that alone that could still be worth it, because being able to do two very powerful moves in a row would be better than doing one and then doing three less powerful moves before circling back to that powerful move again. Except for this other thing where you can't dupe the same move twice in a row. So if you do Slasher with Giacobani, right? If you do Slasher, and then Mimic Ball will dupe that. It'll do Slasher again. And then you use Purple Guy and you use Slasher. Virtual Freddy will spawn, he'll do his animation, but a fourth Slasher will not happen. But even though the Slasher doesn't spawn, the player speed of the rest of the characters in your party is still not going up because Virtual Freddy is on the field. So you just slowed down your entire party for absolutely no reason. Again, this could work out for you. This could work out if you get Giacobani, use Slasher, Virtual Freddy copies it, and then some other character use some other move, and then it dupes that, and then you use Purple Guy, you use Slasher, and then it will dupe it because it didn't do it twice in a row. That could happen. But it's just, overall, you're gonna have to go into a battle for whether or not all of that is worth it. And if you have two characters back to back that are using the same move that you want to use, then it's objectively worse to have Mimic Ball active because you're just slowing yourself down. It would be better to just not use it, go through your whole rotation at full speed, and just going through. Mimic Ball can be useful. All of these moves that Paper Pals have can be useful. It's just that the times where they are so infrequent that they may as well not exist. There is basically never a time where I would want to use Paper Pals. Which is much like the next character that I want to put on the list, but it's still slightly better, is Withered Chica. Now, Withered Chica has Bite 2, Prize Ball 2, and Cupcake. I've already talked about Prize Ball 2, but Bite 2 and Cupcake, they are bad moves, but they're better than what Paper Pals have, because there are still some situations where you'd want to use them. Bite 2 is reliable, fast damage that actually works really well on some other characters that have moves with long wind-up. So Springtrap definitely comes to mind. But in this context, it really, yes, Prize Ball 2 has a long wind-up. And yes, you could maybe sort of kind of justify only using Bite 2 and never using Prize Ball 2. But honestly, they're kind of equal. Like, honestly, the damage would probably come out to be about the same unless you have really bad luck. Because at the end of the day, Freddles is still going to be better than Bite 2, and you're gonna have a pretty good chance of getting it out of Prize Ball 2 eventually, you know? Or you could get Water Hose 2 10 times in a row and it'll be completely useless, and maybe you would have been better off using Bite 2. It's reliable, it's a toss-up, you could probably use either or. Cupcake is another move that you could situationally use if your party is, low on health and, surprisingly, you're not in the mood to use Bite 2 or Prize Ball 2. But similar to Paper Pals, there's never really a situation where I would want to pick Withered Chica over any other character. very, very, very lacking damage, and very, very, very lacking healing, especially for a tier 3. Not the worst character in the game, but pretty close. What is the worst character in the game, at least for when you get him, is the third worst, which is Fredbear. Fredbear has, I believe, Regen Song, Mimic Ball, and Megabyte. Probably not in that order. Now, in isolation, these moves aren't actually that bad, except for Mimic Ball. I already talked about Mimic Ball. Regen Song is actually a really, really underrated move that we're going to be talking a lot more about later. And Megabyte actually it can actually output some pretty respectable damage, but the problem with it is that you can only get Fredbear after you've gotten to Pinwheel Funhouse at the very end of the game. Or, I mean, I guess you could argue that's the mid game, but I'd say that's probably entering the late game. And at that point, Regen Song isn't going to be all that great because you have access to gift boxes. Mimic Ball isn't that great because it's always bad. And Megabyte, that's hard to say for some reason. And Megabyte is just lacking damage compared to the other things you have at your disposal, like Cosmic Song or Spring Locks, or Endo Army, or just literally anything else. Like, there's really never a chance that you would want to use Megabyte. And even if you did, you'd be better off having Nightmare or Nightmare Fredbear, which you can, well, I mean, you can't get Nightmare earlier, but technically, you can get Nightmare Fredbear earlier to get Megabyte. All the same as Fredbear's. Like, there is not a single situation that you would want to use Fredbear unless you're going for universe ending. And that isn't really an objective thing that you'd want to win the game. You know, like, we're talking about strength here, not getting niche endings. If we were talking about getting endings, Fredbear would probably be in the S tier because he's the only way to get universe. But because we're talking about strength, he just lacks so much, I'd never want to use this character. The last character that I'm going to be putting in the D tier, I know someone who's going to be happy to see this, is Endoplush. Endoplush is bad, but he's so close to being bumped up a tier. I think he's so close to being put in the hardly useful category. He has 3 moves. He has I-Beam, Neon Wall, and Water Hose 2. I-Beam is, again, actually a pretty good move. Laser crits are awesome. Like, any chance, it's why Endo Army is so good. The fact that you can just do 1,000 damage, especially with a character that, well, that is sometimes rated so low, we'll get to that later. This one isn't, this is tier 4, but being able to just do 1,000 damage with, you know, a bit of Scott's Magic Touch, that is really powerful. That is nothing to sneeze at. But first of all, again, like the other moves that we've talked about in this category, you can't rely on it. Like, the stars kind of need to align for I-Beam to work. It has the potential to be very, very good, and I use it on occasion. But I'd never pick Endoplush for that reason. Water Hose 2, I've already talked about. It's basically useless. It's completely outclassed by Unscrew, or just doing damage. You know, I would never ever use Water Hose 2. I think it's a contender for one of the worst moves in the game, probably right behind Mimic Ball. And then there's one move that's actually really good and essential to beat the game, which is Neon Wall. And you could get Neon Wall to work. But why wouldn't you just use Auto Shield, you know? Like, again, reducing the damage that you take and completely denying Alarm from working, those are 2 very important things for this game. But the fact that Auto Shield exists, it just makes it... Because if you are using Neon Wall with Endoplush, first of all, you're dedicating an entire character slot to using Neon Wall. And that's already a problem. You could argue that you're also kind of using I-Beam, but not really. First of all, if you're doing this, if Endoplush dies, you're going to be without a Neon Wall for a little while, if you can't revive him basically instantly, which is a pretty big problem. And second of all, Why wouldn't you use auto shield? Like, I know I keep saying it, but like, there's literally, you get it in Choppy's Woods. This is a tier 4 character. Endoplush is a tier, right? He might be tier 3. He's either a mid-tier character or a late-tier character. Like, the time at which you get Endoplush, you would have already had access to auto shield. Like, it's basically just guaranteed. Like, and it's so reliable, and you don't need to give up a party member slot for it. You can give up a chip slot, which is so much more forgiving. There's just never a time where I would use a character for no other purpose than Neon Wall because auto shield exists. Now, if you're doing a no red chips challenge, or if you're doing some moral code where you won't get, XYZ chip before you go into the XYZ area, if you're doing that, maybe Endoplush will be a good pick for you. But for me, who's doing a casual playthrough with no restrictions, Endoplush just isn't worth it. Okay, so now we're actually going to leave the D tier into the C tier, which is characters that I think have potential to be useful, but in 90% of situations, no one's going to use them, which is actually only one character, Toy Freddy. Toy Freddy is the lowest ranked tier 1, which is kind of surprising because the tier 1s actually tend to do pretty well on my list. Why is Toy Freddy in C tier? Well, he has 3 moves. He has Mic Toss, Party Favors, and Speed Song. Mic Toss is basically a nothing move. It's an okay early game move if you need like quick, relatively good low-level damage. It doesn't scale well with level, but when you're just starting, yeah, Mic Toss is okay. Party Favors, At higher levels, I actually think that the healing is okay, but I think there are better options. I think the damage is okay, but there are better options. It's kind of just in this weird middle ground where it does kind of okay at high levels, but if you're at high levels, you'd want to use other things. And also, this is a tier 1 character, which don't tend to get that high level unless there are some weird circumstances. Again, we'll get to that later. And then his best move by far is Speed Song. Speed Song is a fantastic move. It is so good, but the context just screws it up so hard. Because on a character like Endo 02, Speed Song, you could definitely get away with using Speed Song on Endo 02. It's actually not that bad of a pick. But on Toy Freddy, you're going to be, if you're smart, if you know what you're doing, you're going to be using Birthday. And yes, Speed Song comes with the benefit of having like 6 times the duration or something crazy like that. But it doesn't matter because if you have tier 1 characters, you're going to be using probably Toy Chica and you're going to be using nothing but Birthday. And then you may as well take the extra strength and defense, which are so important on tier 1 characters anyway. Like, speed is really good. Speed is probably the best buff in the entire game. But without any real damage to back it up, you need strength. And that's why Birthday is so much better than Speed Song. So why wouldn't you just use Birthday? Why are you using Speed Song? Go use Birthday. There are situations where you might want to use Speed Song, like if Freddy and Toy Chica just die, or, if you're fighting an eyesore, they get unscrewed or something, or your front party is stunned and you gotta go to your back, and hey, you may as well use Speed Song just in case, disaster strikes. There are situations where you could use Speed Song. Are they frequent? Not really. Not in this context. Not in the context that you would be using Toy Freddy. Speed Song is a move that needs to be backed up by higher firepower. And Toy Freddy, Mic Toss, and Party Favors just don't make the cut in that regard. Okay, now we're moving on to what would be the B tier. These are the characters that are sometimes useful. They're not objectively horrible, it's just that they have a niche. But that niche is, oh god, I think, okay, there we go. Sorry, I thought Chrome crashed for a second. it's just that niche is actually pretty good. This is the point where we're actually getting into characters that aren't that bad, especially in the higher tier. Hello? Hold on, I'm gonna do a cut real quick and figure out what's going on here. Okay, that was a little weird. My browser just stopped working, but whatever. Okay, so, like I was saying, this is the B tier, this is where characters actually start to get pretty good. The character I'm going to be putting at the bottom of B tier is Marionette. Marionette, off the top of my head, I think he has... Oh god, what does he have? Oh god. He has Prize Ball 2... Oh, that's what he has. He has Prize Ball 2, Mystery Box, and Escape Key. Now, we've already talked about Prize Ball 2. We've already talked about Mystery Box. They're bad moves. Mystery Box 1 is even worse than 2, which is kind of funny, but I would never want to dedicate a character slot to those two moves. But in my opinion, Escape Key takes Marionette out of the realm of being objectively horrible. Now, it's actually pretty close. I think you could make an argument for knocking Marionette a tier down, just because Unscrew is so much better than Escape Key, because being able to having a pretty good chance of taking out one character is much better than having a chance of taking out many characters at once, because usually the times where you would be using a one-shot move would be on a boss or a party member encounter. But Escape Key can work in a pinch. I think that if you get Marionette early on, like all of the one-hit KO moves, Escape Key can actually be really useful. The problem is that it's just the only real move he has that's worth using. Again, I think that you could make an argument for putting him down a rank. I just think that Escape Key is good enough to put him a bit higher. The character that I think is a little bit better than Marionette is Withered Freddy. Withered Freddy has Mic Toss, Gloom Song, and Escape Key. Now, Withered Freddy is actually a pretty well-balanced character. All of the other characters that we've gone through so far have had one move that you could maybe kind of sort of justify using, or maybe two moves that you could maybe kind of all of the moves that Withered Freddy has, you're probably going to be using in tandem if you're using Withered Freddy. Mic Toss, like we've talked about before, it's damage. You throw it out, it does a little bit of damage. Not much damage, but it does something. It chips in. And normally, on a tier 3 character, Mic Toss will be a horrible move to have, but it actually works kind of well in the context of Withered Freddy, because his other two moves don't do damage. Gloom Song is a really good debuff, which reduces the damage that enemies deal to you. And Escape Key, we've already talked about, it has a chance of one-shotting whatever's in front of you. I think it's like a 17% chance, somewhere in there. So all of these moves actually have a use. If you're fighting a boss, or just a group of enemies you don't know that you can deal with, you can use Gloom Song right out of the gate. And make them deal less damage, basically giving yourself an armor buff. But you can stack it with armor, so you can actually take very little damage using Gloom Song. Once Gloom Song is active, you don't need to worry about it again until it expires or until it's about to expire. Then, if you're fighting a group of enemies or one enemy, regular enemy, then you could use Escape Key. And if you're fighting a boss that you don't want to take the 1% chance that you one-shot, you use Mic Toss. May as well get a little extra damage in. All of the moves that Withered Freddy has, you could reasonably use, which I really respect in a character like this. I really think that's really cool. There's kind of a meme I have in my head where I just despise the tier 3 characters. I've actually done a playthrough where I beat the game only using tier 3 characters, and it was really hard. All thanks, thanks to one character, which, I'll actually link the video. If I can figure out how to make an annotation, you'll see the character that carried me through, but you might already know who it is. But out of the tier 3 characters, this is actually one I really respect, because all three of the moves you could reasonably use. not great moves. I wouldn't always justify using Withered Freddy, but you could if you have him. If you have nothing else, you may as well throw him on. Maybe. You could justify it. He'd be good for debuffing. Speaking of debuffing, hey, Phantom BB. This was a character that I thought Phantom BB was the worst character in the game for a really long time. But I need to give him a little bit of credit. He's actually not that bad. He has 3 moves. He has Toxic Bite, Gloom Balloon, and Rainy Day. Well, he doesn't have Toxic Bite. He has Toxic Balloon, which is Toxic Bite, but worse because it doesn't do bite damage. But anyway, Toxic Balloon, it deals toxic damage. Passive dot damage, that's really good. I mean, you may as well throw it on, right? Like, Gloom Balloon, same thing as Gloom Song, except it comes out a little later. Again, you may as well throw it on. Rainy Day. This is one of the few characters in the early game that can actually reduce the defense of an enemy, which is really, really good. Not even just for speedruns, but just in general. Rainy Day is a really good move, and this is one of the few characters that has it early on. This is, through and through, a debuff character. A lot like Phantom Freddy, who's in the same tier. And that's kind of why Phantom BB kind of sucks, is he works the same way as Phantom Freddy, is that you would cycle through the same 3 moves to continue to debuff the enemy. But why wouldn't you just use Phantom Freddy? Like, I get it, Phantom Freddy is technically rarer than any other character in its tier, and is one of the few big 6 rare characters. I get that, but it's so close that you're probably going to get Phantom Freddy, especially if you grind out in Fazbear Hills. You're probably going to get Phantom Freddy once you have fine characters. Or maybe just by luck itself. So why not just use Phantom Freddy? Like, say, screw Toxic Balloon, and screw Gloom Balloon, which is just Gloom Song but worse, and just use Phantom Freddy. Like, I don't want to say that. I don't want to say, oh, well, this character is bad because this other character exists. And there are times where you're not going to have Phantom Freddy, but you will have Phantom BB. But he's kind of just worse, and you could justify using him. You could absolutely. He's not a bad character in isolation. It's just that he's just Phantom Freddy, but with a worse Gloom Song and no Sludge. Like, it's kind of just, why would you use it? Toxic is nowhere near as good as Sludge will ever be. Sludge is basically a meta move. Alright, the next character I'm going to put in the list is Toy Bonnie. Hello, go in. Toy Bonnie, in some situations, you could argue that in some situations, he's one of the best Tier 1 characters, but I think in a casual setting with no restrictions, he's not actually that great. He has Bash Jam, Munchies, and Prize Ball 1. Bash Jam, I actually think is pretty bad. It's the way Bash Jam is supposed to work is it's supposed to be really good group early game damage. It doesn't scale well with level, that may be true, but it's good it's supposed to be good group damage in the early game. But Munchies is just kind of better. I mean, well, not really. Munchies is worse in the early game and becomes better in the late game, which is weird to say for a Tier 1 character. But for Toy Bonnie, this is usually a character you'd have in your second party as like, shit, my back's against the wall. I kind of need to use Prize Ball here to get a jump scare in. You'd never really use Bash Jam early on. You would usually use it later in the game. First of all, that's a problem with Tier 1 characters as a whole. But also, it's just going to get outclassed by Munchies, because Munchies scales so much better with level than Bash Jam does, because it does like 8 hits per move, you know? I mean, that obviously depends on how many enemies are in front of you at a time, but that's besides the point. And all of that doesn't matter anyway, because if you're using Toy Bonnie, you're gonna be using Prize Ball 1. I touched on this when I was talking about Prize Ball 2, but Prize Ball 1 is one of the first really good Tier 1 moves that we've run into so far. Prize Ball 1 You might be wondering why Prize Ball 1 is actually better than Prize Ball 2. That might sound a little backwards, but it's because of the selection of moves. Prize Ball 2 has weird moves like Water Hose 2 and 100 damage poppers and all these weird things that you wouldn't really want. And even the moves that are okay, there are better ways to get them. With Prize Ball 1, there are moves that very few characters in your roster would have. Jump Scare. In Tier 1, there's only one character that has Jump Scare. It's Foxy. We'll get to that later. Cupcake. There are a few characters that have Cupcake, but on Toy Chica, you'd always be using Birthday. You'd be backed into a corner and have to use Birthday unless it was an emergency. So basically, it's only Chica who would be in your second party, probably using Regen Song anyway. Birthday. This would actually free up Toy Chica to use Cupcakes if your back was against the ropes. Or maybe if Toy Chica died or something. Like, having Birthday just randomly is pretty good. Those three moves alone, Cupcake, Birthday, and especially Jump Scare, are what make Prize Ball 1 so good because their moves are so hard to come by in this context. So, does that justify using Toy Bonnie? Sometimes, yeah. If it's a really hard boss that you can't really deal with, a really good way to cheese a boss in the early game is to have Toy Chica, Foxy, Mangle, and Toy Bonnie, and then just some okay bites. You can just perma-stun the boss and just kind of like wait for it to die to whatever bites you have. And that's a really effective strategy. Kind of scummy, and kind of slow, but it works really well. This is a good character. I think Toy Bonnie is the first good character that we've come across. The next character in the list is Regular Bonnie. For a long time, I actually thought that Toy Bonnie was miles above Regular Bonnie, but recently I've come to the conclusion that Happy Jam is really good. Happy Jam is really good. It is the best early game healing thing in the entire game. It's better. It does more healing than Cupcakes does, which is really, really important in a part of the game where bosses can't really one-shot you. They can just kind of chip away at you. If you have Happy Jam, especially if you have things like Gloom Song, like we talked about earlier, or Auto Shield, or somehow Armor Song, I don't know how you get that in Tier... Oh, Birthday. Yeah, actually, no, totally, Birthday. If you had Birthday, Gloom Song, and Auto Shield, you're just going to be getting chipped away at, and healing is so important there. And that's where Happy Jam really starts to shine. Not to mention that Bonnie's other moves aren't actually that bad. Bite and Bash Jam, in this context, are actually pretty good. Bash Jam was really bad on Toy Bonnie because Munchies basically outclassed it in every single scenario. But on Bonnie, it actually makes a lot of sense to use Bash Jam if you're fighting a group, because Bite scales with level at the same rate that Bash Jam does. So if you're fighting one enemy, use Bite. If you're fighting more than one enemy, use Bash Jam. And if you need to heal, use Happy Jam. These are all scenarios that could definitely come up. Are they super important? Not really. Are you going to be able to use Bonnie to the late game? Not really. But for when you get him, Bonnie is actually a really good early game character and something that I can really respect. Okay. Next on the list is Mangle. I gotta show a bit of humility here. Shout out to Bruh, Banana, Dark, Gabe, literally everyone in the world that tried to tell me that Poppers was a good move, and I refused to listen. I have converted. I have changed my ways. I am officially a part of the Church of Poppers. This move is awesome. Being able to do 100 damage in the early game is unheard of. Technically it's 50 damage, and technically it's kind of 33 because it's split between 2 or 3 moves, but still, if you're lucky, this could be doing an average of 50 damage a move, and it's kind of pseudo-passive too, so you can combo it with Hook, which is Mangle's other reliable damage dealing move. So you could put out 2 sets of poppers. If it's more than 10, you can use Hook while you're waiting for it to explode. Once it explodes, you can go back to poppers and actually pump out some really good damage for the early game. And if none of that tickles your fancy, Mangle also has Prize Ball 1, which we were just talking about with Toy Bonnie. This is another really good character. I have nothing but respect for Mangle. Like, this is a very balanced character. I really like Mangle. A character that, again, I gotta show a bit of humility here. A character that normally, before, I would have put this character probably in the A tier. But after I did some unfortunate math and some unfortunate experiences, Nightmare Fredbear just belongs in the C tier. He has, I believe off the top of my head, Toxic Bite 2, Megabyte, and Freddles. Now, woo! For a long time, first of all, this is an endgame character. Technically, you can get him in Out of Bounds, but first of all, he'd be the rarest character on your roster if you got him in Out of Bounds. And also, that requires grinding in Out of Bounds, so it's not really something you'd be doing. Realistically, you're going to be getting him in Pinwheel Funhouse. That's the first problem. The second problem is that Freddles is a much worse move than I thought it was. It actually ends up doing about 250 damage on average. I could get up the math, but it's somewhere in there, 250, 300, somewhere in there. Which is actually less than Megabyte, which is really sad, but and Toxic Bite 2 is just kind of meh. I mean, you could probably use it if you're just kind of waiting on things to happen and combo it with Megabyte, although if I remember correctly, I think the math works out that on average you'd be better off just doing another Megabyte instead of doing Toxic Bite 2, but that's besides the point. Technically, especially at higher levels, Nightmare Fredbear and Freddles can actually do some really good damage, but it's inconsistent. And for such a high tier character, I mean, it's just kind of in fact, I might even knock him down a peg. I might even say he's below Mangle. No, I'll say he's below Mangle. It's just meh. It's kind of wasted potential. For such a flashy move as Freddles, it's just not nearly as good as I thought it was. The next character I want to put on my list is... Man, this is just a string of characters that I was convinced were horrible, but actually ended up not being that bad. Nightmare Chica. Bad Pizza is another move that I gotta give it credit. It's way better than I thought it was. It also just so happens to be basically the only move worth using on Nightmare Chica. If I remember correctly, I think she has Bite 2 and Water Hose. Bad Pizza, on average, will do 350 damage, which, for a long time, I thought for Tier 4 that was pitiful. But now that I understand that Freddles is a lot worse than I thought it was, and actually that Pizza Wheel 2 is a lot worse than I thought it was, which I'll get to later, Bad Pizza actually becomes not a bad pick, because 350 average damage is really awesome. That's actually really solid. And the ability to just do 700 damage, that's even awesomer. That is great. That is really good damage. Especially for a tier 4. Not counting the endos. We'll get to those later. It's more reliable than I thought it was. On paper, yes, 0 to 700 damage is awful. But once you use Bad Pizza in person, your opinion of it will change. I guarantee it. Okay, next character I want to put on the list is Phantom Marionette. Phantom Marionette has 3 moves: Jump Scare, Hot Cheese 2, and Mystery Box 2. Mystery Box 2, I've already talked about. It's a bad move, don't use it. But Jump Scare is a really good move. I talked about it a little bit in Prize Ball, but I didn't really explain why it's so good. The way Jump Scare works is, on a boss, it works on enemies too for a longer duration, but that doesn't matter as much. On a boss, if you use Jump Scare, first of all, it'll just stop their speed counter for 1 to 3 seconds. It'll just stun them for 1 to 3 seconds. Which on its own is respectable. Like, it doesn't work on every character, but on a character like this whose other move is Hot Cheese 2, well, I'll get to that in a minute. Jump Scare works really well. You can just stun a boss in place for 1 to 3 seconds, and that's respectable. And on top of that, you can cancel their special attack, which isn't something a lot of people know about, but no, Jump Scare can cancel an enemy's special attack. If you're fighting Anim Dude, and he uses Fourth Wall, if you use Jump Scare while the little text in the bottom left says Fourth Wall, it will cancel the Fourth Wall, which is busted. That is awesome. It's something that comes up every now and again. It's not something you should rely on. It's kind of just a nice thing that happens. But just think about that. Like, Jump Scare has the ability to save your entire party. And even if it doesn't, at the very least, it's gonna stun the boss for 1 to 3 seconds. Is it the best way to stun a boss? No, absolutely not. But it's a respectable move. And then there's Hot Cheese 2, which is really good, just passive dot damage. There's really no way around it. You slam it down, you forget about it until it expires. It lasts like 61 seconds or something weird like that, which ends up being like 3... Whoa, I knocked something over. Which ends up being 3 moves or something crazy like that. It's awesome. Comboing with Jump Scare, that's a really good option. This is a pretty good character. Okay, the next character is another one that, again, another tier 3. A lot of tier 3s in this tier. Is another tier 3 Withered Foxy. It crashed again. Okay, jump cut. Okay, well, first of all, that crashed my browser source, so that might have actually, The screen might look a little different now, but whatever. Okay, like I was saying, the next character I want to put on this list is Withered Foxy. There we go. Okay, so, Withered Foxy. 3 moves. He has Hook, Hot Cheese 2, and Rainy Day. These are all moves we've talked about. You can kind of see where this is going. Rainy Day, again, really good move. Reducing enemy defense in certain situations is really important and is kind of the crutch of an entire offense. Hot Cheese 2, really good dot damage. Slam it and forget it. And then once you've done both of those things, both of those basically passive status effects, you can use Hook. Just throw in some extra damage, you know? Really good character. Not really much to say. Just very solid. Right above that is regular Foxy. For basically one move, which is Jump Scare, he has Hot Cheese and Hook, which can be good if you're going for damage and you're confident in a fight. But in a balanced fight where you're actually having a bit of trouble, Foxy can be a really important character because of Jump Scare. Again, being able to stun enemies and stop their special attacks is really important. But the reason Foxy is so much better than Phantom Marionette is because he's early. He's a tier 1 character. You get him right out the gate. So you get to use Jump Scare on the early game bosses, which isn't something that Phantom Marionette can do unless you just, you know, leave the map and go to grind in Mysterious Mine, you know, or Out of Bounds or wherever. In a reasonable casual scenario where you're not sweating your ass off trying to get OP characters at the very start of the game, Foxy is going to be so much better than Phantom Marionette any day of the week. Again, like I was saying earlier, using Foxy, Toy Bonnie, Mangle, and Toy Chica is basically like tier 1 meta. Like, basically, kinda, sorta, maybe. It's really good. You should use Foxy. The next character, again, a Freddles character that I thought was a lot better than it was. Nightmare Freddy. The reason that Nightmare Freddy is so high up is, first of all, you can get him way earlier than Nightmare Fredbear, which is a massive bonus. I've actually gotten him in Mysterious Mine before in my 5 times hard mode playthrough, which, you know, carried me so far. It's why I thought Freddles was so good for so long, even though it's really just better than a lot of, you know, tier 1 through 3 moves. But anyway, Freddles, again, okay damage. which scales really well as the levels. I didn't mention that with Nightmare Fredbear, but Freddles does, for what it's worth, scale really, really well with damage. You could even argue that it's one of the best level scaling moves in the game, so it would work really well with Strength and Rainy Day. But that's besides the point. Another reason that Nightmare Freddy is so good is because of Sludge. Reducing enemy speed is probably the second best enemy debuff out of the three, not including Toxic. And only a little bit worse than Rainy Day. In fact, in a casual playthrough, you might even be able to say that Sludge is better than Rainy Day. There was actually a period of time, believe it or not, where Sludge, where people would use Nightmare Freddy instead of Nightmare in Fixed Party, Normal, and Hard because of Sludge and no other reason. Over Rainy Day, just because reducing enemy speed is really good, because if the boss is going to one-shot you anyway, Gloom isn't going to matter. If the boss would one-shot you with Gloom, you're going to want to use Sludge. Reducing enemy speed is just amazing. It also combos really well with Haunting, which we'll get to later. Sludge is a really good defensive move. Comboed with Freddles, it's really good. Would you ever use Bite 2? Maybe in the early levels of having Nightmare Freddy, but remember that as you level up Nightmare Freddy, Freddles is eventually going to overtake Bite 2. It might even overtake Bite 2 on average from the very start, but Freddles, Sludge, Bite 2, pretty good moves, very good pick. Time for the next character, which is one of which my opinion has changed drastically. I talked a little bit about it with Fredbear, and I'm coming back to it now. I'm talking about Chica. Regular, no power windows Chica is so much better of a character than I thought she was. You need to understand just how good Regen Song is. You might not think it's good. You might think it's just a waste of a move because the only time you used it was in Fazbear Hills. But the reason it's so good is because Regen Song doesn't scale with your level. It scales with your area code, which is such a big bonus. Because from level 1, you can be in a high tier area and get insane healing per second. I think it can go up to like 50. Regen Song is such a big bonus in higher areas. Chica is such a weird case because it's one of the only tier 1 characters that you don't need any levels on her for her to be viable. And even forgetting Regen Song, Cupcake's very plausible. You could definitely use Cupcakes. Party favors. If you're confident in a fight, if your health is high and you're on Chica, it's just a move you can use. It's extra damage. You may as well. It might be 2 damage. It could be 20 damage. It might not matter at all. But you may as well throw it in. It's a move you could use. You could use all 3 of Chica's moves to reasonable effect. It would be really good. Chica is a really good move. Chica is a really good character. Probably for no other reason than Regen Song. If Regen Song wasn't a factor here, well, yeah, like, she'd probably be in the F tier, but because of Regen Song, that bumps her up way high. Seriously, if you haven't used this move, try it out. It is so worth it, I promise. Next up, I'm actually going to be doing 2 characters because they are basically inseparable. I'm talking about Toy Chica and regular Freddy. These characters, in my opinion, I think that Toy Chica and Freddy are the best tier 1 characters. Because of the damage output. So the reason that I'm putting these 2 together is think about what you can do with these characters. So you just started a fight. The first thing you do, you use Birthday. That increases your speed, your defense, and your strength. Now, in some situations, Birthday is just going to be a worse speed song. I talked a little bit about this with Toy Freddy, but sometimes Birthday Engine can be a worse speed song because strength just isn't gonna give you any meaningful bonus. Like, yay, I did 2 more damage than I would have otherwise, you know? Or at high levels, I did 30 more damage than I did otherwise. On some moves, the strength doesn't matter, and sometimes the boss is just gonna one-shot you anyway, the armor doesn't matter. So you may as well just take the longer duration speed. But in the early game, with a move like Pizza Wheel, now everything's different, because if you use Birthday, it increases your speed and your armor, which are both really good things, and it increases your strength. And Pizza Wheel is a move that scales really, really well with level. Now, you need to understand something. At level 1, you should not be using Pizza Wheel. At level 1, you should not be using Pizza Wheel, even with Birthday, because you can't multiply 0 by 2. Because at level 1, your level is technically 0, and that level 0 is what's used for the calculation, and if you multiply 0 by the times 2 you get from strength, you're not getting anywhere, you're not getting anything different. You're basically doing nothing. You'd be using Mike Toss. So, in that way, yes, you could use Mike Toss on Freddy on an early level. And by an early level, I mean literally level 1, and then from then on, use Pizza Wheel. Because then, you're going to be spawning an average of 3 pizzas, and those pizzas are each going to do about, like, 10 damage. So you're doing 30 damage in a single move from level 2. If you level up Freddy to, like, level 10, you could be doing 150 damage. Like, the damage that you get from Pizza Wheel with Birthday is so good. It is the best tier 1 damage that you can possibly get. I mean, there are other niches, like, technically, if you're using bites or chips, or I guess munchies might actually be a good contender as well. But Pizza Wheel is just so good, dude. On top of that, he also has Birthday. Like, if you need a backup Birthday, then you can use it on Freddy. Like, if Toy Chica dies and you prefer the speed and the armor over dealing a slightly more damage, Birthday would be a really, really good pick. Like, that is just, it's awesome. Okay. That's pretty much all I have to geek out over these 2 characters. They're basically inseparable. Like, if you're using Toy Chica, you're going to be using Freddy, and vice versa. I mean, obviously, that's not always going to be true, but eventually one of them's going to get knocked out, and you'll be left with the other once you get better characters. But honestly, Toy Chica Freddy is an amazing combo that has carried me through a lot of a lot of moments. I very much recommend it. Okay, this is actually the last character. The C tier is the most popular tier in this list, and the last character going in it is Phantom Mangle, which is actually kind of a mediocre character, but Pizza Wheel 2 is good. Like, I can't really I'm sad because literally I can't even geek out about this character like I can with some of the others in this tier. Pizza Wheel 2 is good. Yeah, I mean, for a tier 2 character, Pizza Wheel 2 is good. It's really good. I mean, there's kind of just no way around it. Yeah, I mean, that's it. Yeah, the other moves are kind of bad. I think he has, like, Hook and Mystery Box, which you would never use, but... Anyway, yeah, time to go into the B tier. So the B tier has the characters that, in my opinion, these are actually, we're starting to get into the characters that you could actually argue are meta in certain situations. These are, if you have these characters, they're not always going to carry your team, but they're usually going to be pretty damn good. The first character that I think falls into this category is Plushtrap. This is a character I slept on for a really long time, but Plushtrap actually has a lot of the things that we were talking about earlier, but the way he works just makes him such a good character. He has Sludge, which, like I've talked about before, awesome move, but the difference between... Sludge, really good move, but you might be thinking, well then, why isn't he worse than Nightmare Freddy? It's because he has bad pizza. And at a low level, bad pizza does more damage than Freddles, on average. Which is just objectively better. You can use Sludge And then once you've used Sludge, once you have the passive ability out, you can use Bad Pizza and do really good damage. Plushtrap is more than just a debuffer. He's really good damage as well, which is just... it's good. It's really good. I slept on this guy for so long, and I really wish I hadn't, because he's so awesome. Unfortunately, I don't have much else to say than that. He slows people down and he does a lot of damage, but that's kind of all you need. You might, again, as the level goes up, eventually Nightmare Freddy will overtake Plushtrap. But I think that with characters like these, where you would swap them out anyway and they wouldn't get a chance to level up that high as you get better characters, I think that context is important here, and I think that Plushtrap would actually be better than Nightmare Freddy just because you're not going to be able to level up that much. You could argue otherwise. You could probably say that Plushtrap goes closer to, the C tier, but I wouldn't. I think this is where he belongs. Next up is BB. Balloons is awesome. Balloons is, especially for when you get it, but especially in general, Balloons is the best move to scale with level in the game. So if you get BB early on, combo that with Birthday and Rainy Day, and you're going to be pumping out some insane damage. Literally, I think that Balloons is the only move in the game. Well, okay, that's not true. There are some others, but is one of the only moves in the game that multiplies its damage by the level. So you're basically, for every level you get, you're exponentially increasing the damage you're dealing. And if you're using Strength and Rainy Day alongside that, oh boy. You're basically never going to use Poppers or Hot Cheese. I mean, you could use Poppers as you first get them, but probably not Poppers or Hot Cheese. Probably just Balloons. The character that I would put... I'm kind of going to do a character sneeze here. I'm going to put a lot of characters in a row. Shadow Freddy. Come on. There we go. I have a list here I'm looking at. Shadow Freddy, JJ, Phantom Foxy, Phantom Chica, Withered Bonnie, and Nightmare Foxy. These are all... This is the cast of Unscrew characters. Unscrew is a really niche, really powerful, really bullshit move. The fact that you can just kind of... First of all, it's really good for character grinding, because, just being able to say, screw you, I want to one-shot whatever's in front of me, and having a pretty good chance of doing it. That's really good, especially with Unscrew 2, which is why these two are at the top. But on top of that, kind of the BS part, yes, you can one-shot bosses with Unscrew, which means that you can basically... You can have the worst equipment in the game and have an okay chance at just deleting the boss in front of you after a few tries, I've recently beaten Anim Dude with only tier 1 characters and 3 Reapers, and that's all I had. And yeah, it took a while, but I did it. It's a really... for something so luck-based, it's a really reliable way of getting through bosses. Which sounds kind of backwards, but eh. And on top of that, some of these characters have some good moves alongside them as well. Shadow Freddy really doesn't. He really only has Unscrew. But JJ has Balloons and Poppers. Phantom Foxy has Jump Scare and Toxic Bite. Phantom Chica has Sludge, which is really good, and Toxic Bite, which is okay. These two have Unscrew 2, which is basically the only time you would use the only move you would use on these guys. Except, you could definitely use I-Beam on Withered Bonnie, because in this context where he's only tier 2 and you get him so soon, the 1000 damage crit could definitely turn the tides of a battle, and I've carried entire fights with I-Beam in certain scenarios where that 1000 damage is just so good. And then, Nightmare Foxy, Hot Cheese too. You can't really go wrong with it. It's a really good move. But really, it's about the Unscrew. But if you don't want to rely on it, these are also really good characters. Okay, now we're going to be going into the A tier, which are the characters that are almost always useful. Like, there's very rarely going to be a chance where you're not going to be using these characters. Now, let me preface with something. I've made a little rule about this tier list, and that is that I'm going to assume that you are not using the secret Update 2 portal. If you were, all of the Update 2 characters would be at the very top of the list and would be, you know, S tier all the time. But I'm going to assume that by the time you've gotten these characters, you've beaten hard mode. Like, and that the only bosses that you would reasonably use Update 2 characters on are Chipper and CMR. Okay? Okay. So, for the reason I bring that up is the character at the bottom of the list is Jacko Chica. Probably the worst. Probably, actually, well, not the more I think about it, the more I'm actually going back on this. Wait, yeah, I'm a dumbass. I forgot what move she had. I'll get back to that one in a minute. What I meant to say was Chipper. Oops. Chipper's really only usable move is Buzzsaw. I mean, he has some others, but I don't even think they're Update 2 moves. I think he might have... I know he has Mimic Ball. I think he has Speed Song? He has some third move. I can't even remember. He has Buzzsaw. That's the only one you'd move. Okay damage. I mean, it can do up to 5,000, or average of 5,000, up to 9,000, 10,000, 9,000, I think. I think 8,991, if I remember correctly, but that's besides the point. It's kind of unreliable, but it's good damage. You know, you can't really go wrong with Buzzsaw. It's also worth mentioning, again, this isn't a tier list for speedruns, but I do want to mention that out of all the Update 2 characters, Chipper is the one that you can get the fastest, potentially, because other characters in other Update 2 minigames, where, you know, like Foxy Fighters, that's going to take you like a minute and a half. Freddy in Space, that's going to take you like 4 minutes off the top of my head. Foxy.exe, that takes another minute and a half. Chipper, you can get in, technically you can get him in 58 seconds, but even reasonably, you can get him in like 1 minute and 3, you know? Like, if you're good at CMR, like, you can get him sooner than any other Update 2 character. For a casual playthrough, it's not very important, but it is so important in speedruns that it's worth bringing up. Okay, next character that I want to put on the list is Nightmare BB. Actually, no, Edge is going to crash first, and then I'll... Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, give me a minute. Okay, like I was saying, the next character I'm going to put on the list is Nightmare BB. So, Nightmare BB is actually an okay Update 2 character. He has Balloons 2, which is awesome. Like, it can... at a certain level, I don't remember which level, I think it's level 15, on average it starts doing... more damage than Fourth Wall, but if Strength and Rainy Day are in the mix with that, it's gonna do like it's gonna start doing. If you have Strength and Rainy Day, Balloons 2 starts doing more damage than Fourth Wall at like level 3 or 4, I think. Like, it's nuts. Like, Balloons 2 scales so hard because every single balloon, just like Balloons 1, multiplies the damage by the level. It is so insane. And then he has Bubble Breath, which is necessary to survive in Geist Lair. But, first of all, Bubble Breath is kind of unnecessary because Nightmarion has it, and if Nightmarion dies in Geist Lair, well, you're kind of screwed anyway because you're probably fighting Rainbow. And more than that, a lot of the Update 2 characters that I'm putting in this tier are here because... the damage that you do with Update 2 characters doesn't usually matter unless it's Slasher, where it would matter on Chipper, where it would actually matter on Chipper and CMR. But the really good damage, while it is sometimes in the tens of thousands, it just doesn't stack up. It just doesn't stack up. Still really good damage, but because you're not really going to be walking around with it, and you're really only going to be using it for the 2 hardest bosses in the game, it doesn't matter as much. And that's what Nightmare BB suffers from. Is like, Balloons 2 can do more damage than Fourth Wall. Cool. But Fourth Wall has some added utility that I'll get to later, which just makes it fall short in most scenarios. If you have access to Update 2 Portal, Balloons 2 is awesome. It will carry you through 157, or 100%, but because we're not counting that, I'm not even going to talk about it. The last character we're going to be putting in this tier, and the one I was going to put at the bottom, but I forgot about Jacko Bombs. Jacko Chica has Jacko Bombs. Thank you for watching. But no, really, like, on average, Jacko Bombs does 10,000 damage, which is more on average than any other Update 2 attack. It's the same as Slasher, actually, funnily enough. Again, you're not going to be walking around with this move. It does a lot of damage, yes, but it doesn't matter because you'd be using Slasher or Fourth Wall anyway on the fights where that extra damage would actually matter. So it's nice, it's powerful. I need to mention it, but it's not enough to put Jacko Chica in the S tier. Next character up is Nightmare. I'm actually gonna lump Nightmare in with Nightmare Bonnie. They both have Rainy Day 2, which is Rainy Day, but with twice the duration, which is so convenient. It's just so convenient. Not even to mention the damage. The damage can be really good as well, but to reduce enemy defense for 60 seconds is just bonkers. These two characters are probably interchangeable because Pizza Wheel 2 and Megabyte do about the same damage. Pizza Wheel 2 will scale better with level, but really it's about the Rainy Day 2. Nightmare is our first meta character, like objectively in Fixed Party Normal meta character. Technically you could also use Nightmare. In fact, actually I'm going to put Nightmare above and a casual playthrough. It's really close. Nightmare Bonnie has the advantage of you can get Nightmare Bonnie sooner than Nightmare, but Nightmare comes with the advantage of actually having more health off base, which is more useful in Fixed Party. But for a casual playthrough, it doesn't really matter. Being able to get him sooner is more useful. Also, Nightmares are really rare. They're really close. I'm going to put Nightmare Bonnie slightly above. It's about the Rainy Day 2. That's the important thing. And now, one more character that, honestly, I'm so tempted to put this character in S tier. I might do it. I might do it anyway. It's so close. It's honestly so close. I'm gonna do it. Phantom Freddy, S tier, first S tier character. All right. So S tier characters are the characters that are basically always going to have a use. They're basically never. If you get this character, you're always going to want to use them. So why is Phantom Freddy so important? Well, it's because if you have Phantom Freddy in your first party, you're basically having a permanent curse status. Because he has Phantom Freddy has 3 moves: Gloom Song, Rainy Day, and Sludge. So what you can do is, on move 1, you can use Rainy Day, and then you go through your cycle, and on move 2, you can use Sludge, and then you can go through your cycle, and on move 3, you can use Gloom Song, and then by the time you come around again to move 4, just now is Rainy Day expiring, so you can use Rainy Day again. And now it's completely refreshed. And then you go through your rotation again. And you can use Sludge as that's expiring, and then use that, and then go through once again and use Gloom Song, and then Rainy Day, and then Sludge, and then Gloom Song, and then Rainy Day, and then Sludge. And just go through this cycle where you're permanently debuffing the enemy. Phantom Freddy is the only single character in the game that can permanently debuff that can permanently debuff. Now, a few things to note. He is level 2. He's going to have some pretty low health. Or in tier 2, he's going to have some pretty low health at higher levels. And in certain situations, you could argue that depending on the move you're using, the Rainy Day might not be worth the character slot. But in the early... Phantom Freddy is one of the few characters that is such a good early game character, but is also extremely viable in the late game. Dark actually used Phantom Freddy in his Nuzlocke run in the first party, just because being able to slow down the enemy, use Rainy, reduce the defense of the enemy, and reduce the attack of the enemy permanently is so good. This might only be possible with speed. I don't actually know if you can perma debuff without speed, but you should be using speed anyway, so why aren't you using speed? Okay, the next character that I'm going to put up is Springtrap. Springlocks is good. It does an average of like 750 damage. Anyway, I mean, yes, you can use his other moves. Rainy Day is pretty good, but it's usually backed up by one of these two, or even Phantom Freddy sometimes. And Bite 2, it comes out faster than Springlocks, so you could use that, but, I mean, it's about the Springlocks. Like, really, really good damage. And sometimes you can do, like, 1200 damage, and that would be a very Poglocks, if I say so myself. Next character I'm going to put up here is Spring Bonnie. Rarest character in the game, by the way. But it's worth it, because Cosmic Song is really good. Cosmic Song is the... second best offensive move in the game, at least in my opinion. You will see what number 1 is very shortly. It's just really good. Like, I mean, and if you want to throw all your chips in, you could use Springlocks too, but, I mean, in reality, it's about the Cosmic Song. Happy Jam 2 is also really, really good, but that's kind of niche, so I'm not even going to mention it. It's about Cosmic Song. These are kind of brain dead. It's just, this one's here for Springlocks, this one's here for Cosmic Song. That's kind of it. This next character, however... Whew! Oh, man. This is my favorite character in its tier, and what carried me through my Tier 3 playthrough. Golden Freddy is awesome. Haunting is such a good move. Haunting is so good. It has carried me time and time again. I think you could make a case that Haunting is the best move in the game. You could probably do that, and I wouldn't be mad at you. It's probably still gift boxes, but that's besides the point. You could probably make that case, and I wouldn't even be mad. And for a Tier 3? A Tier 3 Haunting. Oh my god, this move is awesome. I just can't help but geek out about it. I slept on it for so long. It is so good. Being able to stun a boss in place all the time is so useful. I think it's anywhere from like 8 to 26 seconds. It's something nuts. Now, it is a little hard to use, and sometimes, you know, the luck just isn't going to be with you, and they're not going to get stunned at all or for not very long. Yes, that's possible. But the potential for Haunting far outweighs the minuscule risk of not doing anything, at least in my opinion. Not to mention, Golden Freddy's other two moves are really good as well. Rainy Day 2. If you're really confident in a fight, or if the boss is already haunted and you think they're going to stay haunted, you can use Rainy Day 2 and reduce their defense for 60 seconds, like I was talking about with these two. And Jump Scare. If you come on Golden Freddy and a special attack is coming in that you don't want the enemy to use Jump Scare and cancel it. This character is so good. This is a Tier 3. This is the this is the second lowest tier character in the S tier. Like, this is so... I love Golden Freddy. That's so good. Okay, Crying Child. Gift boxes. Yeah. Power Song and Armor Song are really good as well, but I think that Crying Child is the worst gift boxer, but is still really good because gift boxes is really good. But, you know, if you're doing really well and you don't need to use gift boxes at any given moment, you could also use Power Song or Armor Song. Just really good pick. I don't have much to geek out on. Purple Guy, one of the only Update 2 characters actually worth using in your main party because Slasher is really powerful. The ability to do 100,000 damage in one hit is what makes some bosses even possible. I mean, I guess not technically. Actually, CMR is possible with damage if I'm not mistaken, but Slasher makes it so much easier. Then again, Slasher is probably the only move you're going to use with Purple Guy, but meh, still really good. Anim Dude. Again, one of the only Update 2 characters worth using in your main party, because the ability to delete mini there is not a character in this game that destroys mini rainbows better than Anim Dude. Megavirus and Fourth Wall shred through mini rainbows and are basically the only way that you're going to keep them at bay. If you're not using Anim Dude on CMR, you're doing yourself a pretty sizable disservice, but you do you. In the same token, probably about equally as important is Nightmarion. Again, Fourth Wall, great for destroying mini rainbows, but is also probably your best bet for Bubble Breath against CMR. Very good pick. Also very easy to get in a casual playthrough. Foxy.exe is a joke, you know? Like, at least CMR is hard for you to get Anim Dude. Like, you can do Foxy.exe on your first time doing it, you know, with reasonable success. Now, the next character I'm going to use, or that I'm going to put up here, is Giacobani. Just because, again, slasher, but also because Jacobombs is really, really good. And actually, the more that I think about it, I think I'm going to put him down below these two. I think I'm going to put him below these two, but above Purple Guy. Just because, again, he falls into this thing where, like, you're going to be using slasher. Like, Jacobombs doesn't really matter. Like, again, if you're just walking around killing stuff, like, yeah, Jacobombs is going to be better, but on CMR and Chipper, you're going to be using slasher, and those are really the only fights where Update 2 characters would matter. But he does have slasher, which is what puts him in the S tier. Okay. The last, believe it or not, the last Update 2 character I'm going to put in the list is Coffee. Coffee is a lot of fun. He's the only other character who has Megavirus, so again, very important for knocking out mini rainbows. This would basically be my build for killing CMR. Would be like Giacobani, Purple Guy, Nightmarion, and Coffee. And if I was fighting Chipper, I'd do Anim Dude instead of Nightmarion. All three of Coffee's moves are really... I've actually... another playthrough I haven't uploaded is I beat hard mode and Chipper using one character and 7 null characters, and that one character was Coffee. Coffee is probably the strongest in isolation character in the game. Gift Boxes is amazing. Best move in the game, obviously. I don't think anyone's mad at me for saying that. Megavirus, extremely good damage and destroys mini rainbows. And Neon Wall 2, which is, you know, if you already have full gift boxes and Megavirus is already up, you may as well use it, get some invincibility, you know, keep those gift boxes for later so you don't need to keep spamming gift boxes. And it can also block moves like Fourth Wall, which is really good for Chipper, and it can block mini rainbows. Hey, how funny is that? It's just a really good character, a really good defensive character. Like, there's not much to say. He's basically a requirement for beating CMR and Chipper. Well, not Chipper, but CMR. And that's the last Update 2 character. Now we're down to the final 4. Now, the next 2 characters, I'm going to put the Endos up. I'm going to put the Endos up here for no other reason than Endo Army. Endo Army is the best defensive move in the game. For when you get it reasonably, it is so good. Not, even if Endo Army, like, if it was a move like Spring Locks, you know, if it was Spring Locks, and it would do like a small burst of lasers, if it did like 6 lasers or something, and they had a pretty good chance of critting, it would still be a really good move. Like, that alone would probably put it in the B tier. But the thing with Endo Army is that it's passive. If you have speed, you can use Endo Army and then go through 2 rotations of moves before finally coming back and then using Endo Army again. And Endo Army has a pretty reasonable chance, mind you, I think it's 1 in 10, to do 1,000 damage per laser. in those two moves, in those two rotations, from using Endo Army once, you're probably going to do about 40 lasers. You're probably going to shoot about 40 lasers. That's 4,000 damage for every time you use Endo Army. What? Sometimes more, sometimes less, sometimes you could get nothing, but sometimes more. I've seen runs where people do like 10,000 damage with Endo Army in like a single use, just because they got super lucky. That's as much as Jacko Bombs, which is an Update 2 move, albeit with a much lower success rate. But this is a passive move that does more damage than Cosmic Song. That is insane. That is nuts. And because you can use that move every 2 rotations, Endo 01, you can use Power Song, and you can have pretty reliable Power Song and Armor Song, as well as the best defensive move in the game. And if you don't have access to Endless Speed, if you want to use your chip slot for something else, you could use Endo 02 as well. I mean, I wouldn't, but you totally could. So you would use Speed Song and Endo Army, and then Power Song, and then for Endo 01, you do Endo Army, Power Song, Endo Army, Armor Song, Endo Army, Power Song, and then flip-flop between those. It's just really good. Like, it's amazing damage. I love the Endos. So yeah. Now, we need to come to the best character in the game, in my opinion. And I'm not gonna lie, I put a lot of thought into this. For a really long time, I think I shared the opinion that a lot of other people do, that there really isn't any way to beat this one character, that a combination of gift boxes and just unrelenting damage is unbeatable. But I've come to the conclusion that I actually think Funtime Foxy is my browser crashed! Are you kidding? Give me a sec. Anyway, alright. So like I was saying, I actually think that Funtime Foxy is the second best character in the game. It's really close. I think that you could make the case that Funtime Foxy is the best character in the game. Because, again, gift boxes. Best move in the game. It is awesome. Like, playing with and without gift boxes is such a different experience. To the point where some people even say it's blatantly overpowered, and I think I'd be inclined to agree. It is so good. Gift boxes will carry you through basically anything. But what Funtime Foxy has over a character like, Crying Child, for example, is Cosmic Song, which, even on its own, remember, Spring Bonnie is in S tier because of Cosmic Song. Keep that in mind, and then remember that Funtime Foxy has gift boxes on top of that. The best move in the game. And then while all your gift boxes are maxed out, you can do 750 damage on average. That is amazing, Not to mention that Cosmic Song scales really well with level, although at that point it starts to matter a little less, but really good. And Happy Jam too. Again, awesome move. But in my opinion, for a casual playthrough, I think that RxQ takes the top spot. It's a similar story to why I think Funtime Foxy is an S tier. RxQ has gift boxes, the best move in the game. But on top of that, he has another good secondary move. He has Haunting. And I've already geeked out about Haunting, but the difference here, the reason why he's so much better than Golden Freddy, is that you can use gift boxes and then use Haunting, and you can keep those gift boxes and basically make them a safety net. To the point where you don't need any other stunning characters. You just need RxQ. To the point where, again, I was making the argument earlier that you could definitely say that Haunting is better than gift boxes because there's a chance that you can perma-stun a boss. That is amazing. And in one character, even if that goes wrong, you still have gift boxes as a safety net. And that is why I think RxQ is the best character in the game. For such amazing defensive value. I think that's really what sets Funtime Foxy and RXQ so far apart from one another. They both have gift boxes, yeah, but RXQ is a much better defensive character that lets you put lets you put a lot more of your energy into your other 3 party members in your first party by perma-stunning the boss. But Funtime Foxy tries to take some of that weight on his own. But in reality, you would probably use both of these in one party. It's not really that big a deal. If you disagree with me on that one, again, I'm not even entirely sure myself. I think that you could totally make the case that Funtime Foxy is better in RXQ, but it's really close. I think that Funtime Foxy is a really close second. I just think that RXQ is probably the best character in the game, which I think is something that not a lot of people would agree with, but meh, we'll see. Either way, this is my tier list. Like it or not, I think this is the best and worst characters in the entire game, which is a lot. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope that this helps you on your future runs. Have a very nice day. Thank you.